Welcome to the Ripple of Change podcast, searching for our quadruple aim, where we highlight, celebrate, and extol others, creating positive change in healthcare and beyond. I'm your host, Dr. Otten, in some circles known as Dr. Rotten. It's a shout out to an old Navy friend there. And today's topic is Patient Empower Thyself. I am joined by two amazing individuals today, both pharmacists, but doing different things now. Claudia Cometa, who is the owner and founder of Peace Advocacy Group, as well as the author of the forthcoming book, Patient Empower Thyself. See what we did there? Everybody following along? Are you tracking with me? I can't help myself. I go off the rails like 2 seconds into this usually. And we also have Bruce Berger, who's become a good friend as well. And I'm thrilled to have him here today. His book is Motivational Interviewing for Healthcare Professionals.
Second edition.
There you go. Second edition.
They'll buy the first one and they'll be missing out on 2 new chapters.
Oh, see, there you go. I love it. Claudia, I'm going to throw it over to you for the first question to get us rolling.
Yeah, well, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for including me. And Bruce, like I mentioned before we started recording, I took your CE course, and I feel like we already knew each other, even though you didn't know that about me. But I actually want to start out, if that's okay, with something we mentioned right before we started recording, because I think it's such a powerful topic of the entirety of the system and where things start to go wrong. And part of that being what you mentioned as the objectification of staff providers in healthcare, and then ultimately what that results in objectification on the patient experience side. So I would love to tee it off there, if that's okay.
Sure. I wrote I don't know if you saw it. I wrote a post yesterday, and it was based upon a talk I gave, and it was also based upon observations that I've made, in that we're human beings. We have fundamental emotional and psychological needs for health, and we know what those are. A sense of being authentically connected to others, people valuing us, having our work have meaning, self-worth, safety, physical and emotional, psychological, creativity, to be listened to. I can go on and on. It would seem to me, if you're going to build any organization or any system in which human beings are involved, you'd want to make sure all of those boxes are checked authentically. If you look at the healthcare system today in many organizations, and Claudia, I'm sure you're aware in pharmacy how bad it's gotten with some of the corporate pharmacies. We're violating all those principles. The healthcare system is fundamentally ignoring what people need in order to be healthy within those systems. And so it baffles me why human beings keep treating each other this way. And then, of course, the problem is when we as healthcare professionals and workers get treated that way, and we're short-staffed and we're chronically stressed. It's very interesting. I'm 73. I turned 73 on Sunday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Part of my point is I had never heard the word moral injury used prior to last year, except in regard to people coming back from war. The trauma that war produces, having to step outside your morals and do something that you don't want to do. And here we are with healthcare professionals suffering from moral injury and burnout because, they take an oath to put patients first, and systems prevent that from happening. And every day they have to face that moral conflict. So when they're treated that way, unfortunately, that seeps into how they treat their patients, because they're stressed, they don't have time. It takes higher level brain functioning in order to truly be empathic and listen to your patients and what's important to them. And when you're stressed, it's just not there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was going to say, holy smokes, Bruce, you got me all fired up real quick. In a good way, though. Although I will say box clicking is definitely a trigger for me. So just hearing that phrase kind of brings
Yeah,
back
even
some of that moral
when I
injury.
said it, even when I said it, you notice I added check the boxes authentically, meaning don't just check it and you're done with it now.
For sure, for sure. Well, it's interesting you bring up the concept of moral injury. You know, having experienced pretty horrendous burnout and reading a ton on moral injury and talking to some amazing individuals recently, including Wendy Dean, which was just a fantastic conversation that we had. I, I didn't realize, I guess, historically how much that affected me. And I think about after I had left my most recent employer, I was literally going into the hospital where I was employed to just fill out some paperwork. I was well past being done working there, and just hitting the button to go up and down the elevator brought back all these sickening emotions. Like I
Yep.
felt anxious, I felt nauseous, I didn't want to be there. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is not good. Like all I'm doing is going in to sign a form, you know. It's just crazy.
You feel
Anyways,
it, you feel it in your entire body.
yeah, it's interesting because I was going to go in, I was going to do some writing and just sit down at the coffee shop. And I was like, I signed the form and I got out of there and went somewhere else to do some writing. But anyways, Claudia, enough of me droning on here. Back to you to impart some questions. There's some brilliance here.
I love this. I think this is real life. And when I work with clients, this is actually like what you just said, Todd, is what people want to hear. What is the real physician experience? Like what is actually happening? And the fact that was a trigger, triggering anxiety inducing event, just being back in a scenario is like speaks largely to the energy that is on the physician side. I think if we get into the communication piece, which Bruce is, the guru of, I would love to hear kind of an interplay of you two talking on this, which is, Todd, on your part, I know since my husband's a physician and I've watched the medical training happen, there's definitely a focus in medical training on, high yield. When you go speak to your attending, you better just give them what they need, and you speak very quick, concisely. Everything's got to be contained because the day's got to move on. And so there's this like train the physician how to speak to their attending and speak to their peers. And then somehow you're supposed to completely shift gears when you're with the patient and speak more, compassionately and not in a high yield way. So I would love to kind of hear the interplay of, Todd, your experience, and then Bruce, the way you train in motivational interviewing and that kind of interplay.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is an interesting thought there for sure. And so true. In fact, I recall a time where I was initially working with my medical assistant and we were caught up and she came in and I let her kind of present the case, and it probably went on for about 5 minutes. And then I said, oh, okay, Carrie, so what you're telling me is the patient has a cold. And she put her head down and said yes. And so you're right, there's that reality of that concise presentation where you want to really convey the information in a short period. But then when you're in with the patient, you want it to be very different. You want that open-ended aspect to it where you ask a question, allow the patient to convey their innermost thoughts and fears and hopes and dreams. And the reality is those that are really good at it, as Bruce will probably say better than I currently, they allow for that. You give a short question and you listen. You shut up and you listen to what the patient's telling you. And the reality is, if you do it well, they're going to tell you everything you need to know. But in this time crunch vacuum that we've created, there's all these interruptions, and then that gets passed down from the clinicians to the patients, and unfortunately contributes to that objectification that you were talking about. And it in reality, I think it's related to the time pressure. So to answer your question, it can be done, but it is difficult. And I think we're seeing that on many, many levels. Bruce, do you want to expand on that perhaps?
Well, interestingly, the folks that created motivational interviewing, William Miller and Rolnick, they've done research and shown that 3 minutes of motivational interviewing is more effective than 7 to 10 minutes of what we traditionally do. That people who are really well trained in motivational interviewing get to the issues faster because they ask good questions, they make it safe for the patient. They really know how to focus on how the patient is making sense. Now, having said that, I find it interesting that we talk about evidence-based medicine all the time. We couldn't imagine people going out and practicing without using evidence-based medicine, but we let them out of school without really very much training at all in evidence-based communication. We know simple example. I love to use this example. A woman's diagnosed with diabetes. She's given a new prescription for diabetes. She goes to her pharmacy and she looks at the pharmacist and says, put this on file. I feel okay. I'll use it when I start feeling bad. Now, this points out a number of issues. All right. One, how come she doesn't know that she can feel okay and still be at risk? In other words, something didn't happen, or maybe her physician did tell her and it was kind of rushed, so she wasn't really listening, or maybe she was feeling okay, so it didn't matter that he or she told him anyway, right? The other thing is, if you listen to the typical response to this, what you'll hear is, that's not a good idea. It's almost always the first response. That's not a good idea. And I always tell healthcare professionals, and if you can put the word stupid at the end of the sentence and it doesn't change your meaning, you're going down the wrong path. Okay. And you can hear the stupid at the end of that sentence. I did a lot of work with MTM companies. And of course, they call patients and follow up on their drug therapy. And we know that when you cause face loss in a patient, and you can cause face loss by saying, no, that's not what we talked about, or you really need to take it every day, not just 3 times a week. Anytime that we cause face loss, patients do one of 2 things. They discount the information or stop listening. In an average call, I counted 7 to 8 instances of face loss in an average 15 to 20 minute call. This says a lot about that we really need to seriously think about formal training of healthcare professionals and how to talk to that patient. And by the way, if you want to know what I would have said to that patient, I would have said, you're feeling okay right now. And so you're thinking at the point in which you start feeling bad, then you'll come back and get the medication. Now, why would I do that? I would do it because I want the patient to know I've listened to her, I'm not passing judgment, and I get what she's saying. Now, would I just say okay and let it go from there? No. I would then, after she said exactly or right, I would say, would you mind if I just shared some thoughts with you? And I'd really love to hear what you think. And now I would kind of bring in the education piece, about why she could feel okay and still be at risk right now. So
Bruce, for the listener and perhaps myself too, I suppose, I'd like to double click on the comment face loss. Can you expand on that just a little bit?
See, if I responded to you, I can't believe you don't know what face loss is. I would be creating face loss in you. In other words, none of us want to feel embarrassed or feel put down or feel we don't want our autonomy preempted, and we don't want our thoughts in any way, shape, or form called stupid.
Yeah.
And we don't want our competency questioned either. We do this with patients all the time, and we don't even realize we're doing it. And the patient literally shuts down when it happens.
Yeah, fascinating.
This is why it's so important. We've learned through our research, there's 2 fundamental things we have got to do to improve adherence and outcomes. We've got to reflect what the patient is telling us accurately and without judgment. And create a relationship that feels safe to the patient. When that happens, information and education become an extension of that caring rather than seen by the patient as a way to put them in their place.
Well, and this is sorry, Bruce. This is probably a natural lead into Claudia, that some of the work that you're doing from an advocacy perspective, right? I would imagine, is that true?
Absolutely. And this whole conversation is so fantastic, because I also see what you just talked about, Bruce, with safety. I mean, basically face loss being lack of safety, and the way that physicians interact with their attendings as they're training, there is no safety. Most attendings are just berating. I mean, hopefully that culture is shifting a little bit, but the old school, I mean, it's a berating type of a culture. And so it makes complete sense that is even unintentionally translated into how communication is happening with patients, because they've just completely been desensitized over their training to that whole face loss situation. But yeah, so on my side with working with patients is I'm witnessing over and over and over again. I'm usually in physicians' appointments, so I'm witnessing. And then the minute a physician says something, I already know what's happening in their mind. I know what's happening in the patient's mind. And then later we'll talk about it, and exactly what I thought was bothering them and made them shut down is what made them shut down. So, I'm kind of there being relatively objective, making sure I'm gathering the information, because I know that as soon as that face loss happens, they're shutting down. They haven't heard the rest of the conversation.
They
And
literally check out.
yeah. So I think the work that you do is so important. I'm sorry, Todd, go ahead.
Oh, no, keep going. I was just thinking, this is fascinating. So do you interject at that point, Claudia, in the conversation with the physician in the room to try and get it back on track?
Sometimes it kind of depends. I assess the entirety of the scenario. Sometimes I'm on speakerphone, so I don't have the, luxury of looking at body language and seeing what's going on, although I'm imagining the scene,
Right.
But I'm also being very respectful of, if a conversation is continuing, I know that I am gathering the information. I'm taking very detailed notes. So I know I'm not going to miss anything. And I don't want my interjection to interrupt a flow and somehow take in 3 minutes of the 5-minute appointment. So I kind of assess where we're at. If it's like a new patient appointment and I know we have time, I will, but I usually state at the beginning what my role and intentions are, and that I will mostly be an observer until the end when it's time for clarification questions. So that way my presence there is not an intrusion to the relationship that's being built.
So, and something else that comes out of face loss, we talked earlier about shame. We mentioned shame. We kind of expect our relationship with a healthcare provider to be safe. And as soon as there's Gershon Kaufman, who's the psychologist who did all of the research to be able to distinguish between guilt and shame. And said that what shame is caused by is what's called the rupture or the breaking of the interpersonal bridge. The interpersonal bridge is that safety that we assume. In other words, if I came on this podcast and either one of you attacked me, I would probably feel shame, because the interpersonal bridge the safety that I assume will be here when I get here would be ruptured.
Mm-hmm.
And when we cause face loss in our patients for whatever reason, that safety is ruptured. One other thing I was going to mention earlier when we were talking about organizations, shame is also produced in those organizations when workers, healthcare workers, and I see this a lot in pharmacy, go to their direct report and say things like, I'm stressed out, I can't keep up. And the direct report's response is one of two things. Either you'll get used to it, it's just hard work. And people don't have problems with hard work. People have problems when they have no control over their work. Okay. And the second thing they say is, you need to chill. You need to get some deep muscular relaxation or do some yoga. So now what we're going to do is victim shame. And do you hear it? And so here the people that hired us, that we think are going to protect us, are now shaming us. And it's just awful. And the analogy I like to use when people say, go get some yoga or deep muscular relaxation. So here's a person who's stressed, burnt out, and let's add something to the agenda. And not only that, if they sit up on the pharmacy counter and the patients see them doing yoga, it'll probably scare them. So they're not going to do this at work, right? So what we're now telling people is go to work every day, 5 to 6 days a week, and breathe in toxic gas, and then go home and put the gas mask on. You hear how insane that is?
Absolutely. Sorry, I'm chuckling. It's just it's a humorous description of the toxicity that exists in so many places. Oh, this reminds me a little bit when I was on the verge of like imploding with burnout. I suggested to my wife Angie that maybe I needed another hobby, and in the book she looked at me like I had 4 heads. Like, you don't need anything else on your plate. If anything, you need to be taking things off of your plate. Right. For goodness sakes. And oh wow, there's so much we could unpack in these comments, Bruce and Claudia. We could probably go on for days. But I'm gonna shift gears just for a second here, because I don't want to miss the opportunity for a Ripple Challenge question. And I was thinking about this. There's no rules to this. I'll offer just a thought or a question, if you will, and then you can both respond. Claudia, I think I'll have you go first. Capsule or tablet?
Hilarious.
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
I can count both of them by 5s like a rock star. So that's my first answer. No, I haven't done that in a while, but I was a pretty good rock star. So my answer is C, none of the above, because I mostly choose not to take medication. If I needed to take one, I would have to go with capsule. There's just, usually an easier ability to change that, open it, swallow it, as long as it's not huge. So those are my answers, but I'm excited to hear Bruce.
No, it's interesting, probably because we're both recovering pharmacists. I say the same thing. If my doctor told me I had high cholesterol, and he said, we need to put you on a statin. I love the language. We need to put you on a statin, and I was not involved in the decision. But in any case, so I said, I'm not going to take a statin because I know too much about them. And I said, I'll make dietary changes and get some exercise. And I'm not taking a statin. I was diagnosed 10 years ago, and my cholesterol's fine. So I would tend to say the same thing. Neither, if possible. If the only thing I can think of otherwise, this is the pharmacist in me again. You say capsule or tablet. I would say head forward or head back. Claudia, do you understand that one?
Yes.
It's how we teach people how to take a capsule or a tablet.
Oh, that's so good. I love those answers. And I'm going to say capsule as well, and perhaps for a different reason. Related to the book, Joshua struggled so much weaning off duloxetine that he would actually take the capsules apart, count out the beads, and go down by 1 bead on a given interval. You talk about some major struggles related to a medication. But Claudia, why don't we go back to you for maybe another question here? This is fun. Lots of laughs. I love it.
Well, first of all, I'm already watching. I'm thinking of that visual of the capsules and the beads, and that's powerful. Like that actually stopped me in my tracks for a second, because we wean patients off of medications all the time, and there are times when we really do need to wean it slower, and we do need another dosage form or another dosage option, and we don't have it for patients. So for him to take that on himself that's pretty powerful. So am I asking a funny question, because I need to be prepared?
You can ask whatever you want. The conversation to this point has been brilliant. A lot of levity, a lot of seriousness, and some learning on my part, right? So take it in whatever. We could talk about carburetors. Before we started, we talked about who knows the least about fixing a car. And yes, there was a debate on that.
I love that competition. I think most people put their money on me out of us three, but who knows? I might know a thing or two. Bruce, I think I would love, since we both have the pharmacy background and neither of us are now practicing in the trenches of pharmacy, I would just kind of love to know, we talked a little bit about Todd's, just emotional reaction going back into a scene of working as a physician, or at least in the energy of that space. What similarities do you have either in stepping into a pharmacy or just remembering the misaligned energy of working as a pharmacist as you're doing your work now?
Well, it's been, for me, it's been a long time since I worked in a pharmacy. When I worked in a pharmacy, the last job I had in a pharmacy was at a corporate pharmacy. I won't name who it was. And I had taken a store that was last in the district to first in the district, but the amount in terms of volume and everything, but the amount of stress was incredible. And I knew pretty much after a year working there, I was going back to school, because this is not what I wanted to do the rest of my life. I've pretty much detoxed, because it's been almost 40 years. So I can walk into a pharmacy now without getting the shakes anymore. But I feel for the people when I go into, I actually use an independent pharmacist who's got an amazing practice and actually can take the time to talk to us. And he's got exam rooms, and he's got, rooms for vaccinations. And so I love going in there. It's an amazing practice. What I worry about is, we are asking for a lot in our profession right now, and I hope we get it in terms of time, but then we better come through. We really better come. When you have the latest stat I saw was we spent $500 billion last year on non-adherence to medication regimens. If we don't think that it's our job to have an impact on that, I really become concerned about the viability of our profession. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that too, Claudia.
Yeah, I'm with Todd. I haven't hit the 40-year point yet of being out, so I still have lots of emotional reaction. And I often tell people, how often are you walking into a pharmacy? Well, really, at this point, most medical arenas, and people are just smiling joyfully. It's just not it. My sister, just to kind of give a comparison to the tech world, my sister worked at Microsoft, and I remember being at my desk working on 1,000 prior authorizations for a geriatric clinic, and my sister calling me that on the Microsoft campus in Seattle that they were just allowed to stop working, grab a beer out of the fridge, and go watch some sports game that was on. And I'm like, I have to go pay for ice for my water. I don't even know what's happening here. Like, how are these two industries this different? And the joke's on me, because when we decided what fields to go into, and I was like, computer science, this was when computers were just beginning to exist. I'm like, that's not the field to go into. I'm sorry that you've chosen that, but I have chosen the correct path. So joke's on me.
Oh, that's interesting you say that, because with my children, they're 10 to 19, and there's 4 of them, and when we talk about what are you going to do, I tell them, you should study what you like, study what you love. Because if you go into a field that you enjoy, regardless of how much money you make, as long as you can sustain yourself, that's going to be much more gratifying. And I hate to say, I probably wouldn't steer them towards medicine right now, but hopefully we can move that around. This has been wonderful. I think we're coming up on about our 30-minute time frame, which is my magic cue to offer the two of you an opportunity to impart one final thought. And you can feel free to piggyback on that. How can our audience get a hold of you? Any plugs that you would like to offer, etc. Do either of you want to go first?
Claudia,
go for
go
it
ahead.
first. Oh, look, we're so kind.
I love it. I love it.
This is the bleeding hearts of healthcare professionals. We just everyone. I will speak quickly so we can move on to Bruce. But you can all the things at peaceadvocacygroup.com. You can find me there. You can chat with me there. Also, really, my only active social media profile is LinkedIn, so you can just find me there by my name.
You can find me at LinkedIn by my name. My website is MI for motivational interviewing, HCP for healthcare professionals.com, MIHCP.com. And you can email me at bbergerconsulting@gmail.com. And what's the last thing I would impart? The only thing I would impart that I would add is we've been talking so much about we've got to create a kinder healthcare system. And I wrote something the other day about who could argue with that, right? But we also have to, yes, you have to, it has to start with way of being. It has to start with mindset. But we also have to train people on what the skills are to do that, to demonstrate what's in here and get it out there to the patient.
I love it. This has been wonderful. I just have so much fun doing these shows. I don't, it's just great. And the smiles and the laughter and the connections and so on and so forth. Like, I had no idea that Claudia had done reviewed some of your work and gone through some of your training, Bruce.
I had no idea either.
That's so cool. I mean,
I kept that as a surprise.
Oh, I love it. That's great. And I'm actually, you know what? I never do this, so I've got to start doing a better job of, this is the book we wrote, Ripple of Change. You can find it at ourquadrupleaim.com. But I'm going to end. What's that?
Should have brought mine to hold up.
Well, maybe we can splice it in or edit it later, Bruce. I don't know. Okay. But we always end with, what positive ripple of change will you create today?
Grab your copy today. Ripple of Change is available in hard, soft, and ebook formats. More information at www.ourquadrupleaim.com. Thanks for listening, and let's turn ripples into waves of lasting change. Stay tuned to this podcast as we search for examples of our quadruple aim.